'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the house, only Uncle Dave was still awake wrapping presents, trying not quite to be so quiet as a mouse. And in fact, this recording is happening at 2 a.m., so I guess once a year is Christmas again. And why not talk about one of the greatest holiday films in my lifetime? One that I have so many fond memories of that Christmas doesn't actually feel like Christmas to me until we've seen Lee Majors save Santa's workshop. Until Elliot Loudermilk has blown the control booth window out with a shotgun. Until Frank Cross has announced that Russian vodka poisoned by Chernobyl is the reason for his being visited by ghosts. I am talking about the Richard Donner directed 1988 film Scrooged. This is my Christmas present to those who are tuning in. I hope you have your eggnog handy, or at least a damn fine cup of coffee. And by all means, before we go any further, before we hit the deck, before the night the reindeer died, hit the like and subscribe button for more content, because this is the 15 minutes of movie memory madness. It's been quite a trying year, I'm sure, for everybody, and Christmas is here, and as the little kids all continue to cheer, a lot of us have probably struggled to get here. It's funny, when I decided this morning to do this, recording this, attempting to record this on Christmas Eve, winding up actually recording it Christmas morning, so this is going to be a pretty quick turnaround for y'all out there. It was more in the jolliness, right? It was more in the sort of remembering how hilarious this movie was, because same year as our last episode, Die Hard, so keeping 88 as a big year for Christmas movies. Maybe back in a time when it was okay to say that you celebrated Christmas and not having to worry that you just pissed off like half the people in the world. But the night the reindeer died has not quite come for me yet, so I feel totally happy saying Merry Christmas one and all, and enjoying this movie about Christmas. This is another one that I saw in the movies as a little kid. In fact, the sort of nostalgia around this one is interesting. Ooh, excuse me. That was some eggnog. It's a little bit interesting because, a phenomenon that is lost amongst our movie-going and streaming service frequenters these days is the catching something partway through. Usually if you're going to the theater, you're catching it from the beginning because you made sure to get to the theater on time, and you get to even see previews before the movie. And for some reason, when we went to see this one, I guess as is par for the course with the holidays, we tend to remember those no longer with us, and my late father, may he rest in peace, and Merry Christmas, Dad. While many things in this life, punctual was not one of them. And he was often he was often the kind of guy that would be jumping in the shower 5 minutes before we were supposed to leave, and then making us about a half an hour late to wherever we were going. So I think with this particular day, we decided to catch the movie before going to the, I don't know, for all my Italian listeners out there, Sunday dinner at Grandma's. And I don't know if it was that we were running late because of him, we got the start time of the movie wrong, whatever it was. We basically walked into the movie already in progress. I think we picked up right about where Elliot Loudermilk was getting fired, so we missed the whole opening with Lee Majors, the whole opening with the sort of review meeting where he was getting to check out all the promos for the upcoming holiday specials on ICS, the fictitious New York network that Bill Murray's character, Frank, oh my god, why Frank Cross, interesting, instead of Ebenezer Scrooge, it's Frank Cross, Frank with the cross to bear, being the youngest executive vice president of programming in television history, getting to sort of berate his board. We had no idea what was going on. Other than that, though, I mean, it's pretty easy to pick up. It's basically the modern, at least for the 80s, and yet to be replicated, I think, modern retelling of the Christmas Carol, A Christmas Carol, the Charles Dickens classic, which is another one that I bounce between. This Scrooged is sort of a staple for me every year. And then the Christmas Carol that came out in 1984, starring George C. Scott as Ebenezer Scrooge. In fact, I've already watched them twice today each. Had them on in the background while I was wrapping all the presents. And of course, like everybody else who was barely fortunate enough to be able to afford presents this year and maybe even got off to a late start buying them, winds up usually, as I was discussing my dad's punctuality, here I am at actually Christmas morning. I'm going to have to pretend that I, wound up running into Mr. Claus as I was putting my presents under the tree, for anybody out there listening who doesn't know that sometimes grown-ups do that. I have to be careful because I know that my nephews listen to this show from time to time. I try to watch my mouth. I try to not be too shocking. Like, I try not to create a promo for a Christmas Carol that features people killing each other, murder on the highway style. In fact, so when we came to the movie late, this was the first time that I ever experienced where once the movie was over, my parents said, hey, let's just sit here. We'll wait till the next show starts. It's only going to start 15 minutes after this showing was over. We'll see the part that we missed, and then we'll go to Grandma's. And so when the ushers came in and were cleaning out the theater after the movie was over, my mom was telling them, oh yeah, we got here late for the last showing, so we just want to stay for the beginning of the next one to see what we missed. And they were totally cool with it. It's almost like such a like, for me, these are the kind of things that the nostalgia of doing this show brings back. These memories of, like, man, like, how many people did that happen to? Usually, especially, could you imagine that today? Sitting there and the ushers coming in to clean the theater, and you say, listen, I was late getting here. I missed the beginning of the movie that I paid an exorbitant amount of money to see. Is it cool if I sit here and watch the first 20 minutes of the next showing? I feel like they would be like, no, you have to go out and buy another ticket. It's almost like there's a severe lack. Everybody's in the Scrooge mode or the Frank Cross mode on permanent these days. And so as much as this movie starts and in the first hour, it's funny. I think it's a good idea to watch Scrooged and then watch A Christmas Carol, because it's almost at times, Bill Murray, one of the things about his genius is when he's a good guy, especially when he's like sort of an aloof good guy, like in The Man Who Knew Too Little, he's very endearing. He's the kind of guy, like, when you watch him play parts like that, or even Peter Venkman to a degree, he was a little bit of a scumbag, Peter Venkman, but he was a kind of a lovable scumbag. You still wanted to meet him. You'd want to hang out with Peter Venkman. In Scrooged, Frank Cross is like hard to endure. And it's not until he starts getting humbled by the visit from the three spirits that you start to kind of, understand more. I think it was easier for me as a kid to sympathize with him than it was watching it with older eyes, especially this year for whatever reason. Like when he like makes his assistant, who was called back then a secretary, but we'll call her an assistant, who is sort of the stand-in for Bob Cratchit. I think her and Elliot Loudermilk, Grace and Elliot, are sort of like they split the Bob Cratchit character into two people, because the way things go down in the original Christmas Carol, it's hard to have it happen to one person. In fact, I'm sure Elliot Loudermilk probably would have been able to sue him these days. So in some ways, this movie holds up quite a bit, like, at least for me anyway, because I lived through the time period that it takes place in. I remember New York in the 80s. I remember just in general, oh man, like even like watching it, you see how many people are walking on the street, and you're just like, man, I would kill to be back in the time where it was just that many people. When you walk in the streets of New York anytime after, say, 2004, It felt like you were in the Matrix. You know what I mean? You're just like, geez, there are so many people in the city. And back then, though, when you would see these crowd shots of people walking on the street, you used to be like, man, New York is so, like, packed. There's just so many people. It's crazy to look back and go, that was mild. That was easy to deal with. But in general, sort of watching this and realizing, like, oh, man, you know, like, it felt more normalized, the sort of corporate greed that we just kind of all laughed at. So many things that wouldn't fly at all. in the sort of new landscape, which I tap dance around mentioning by name. But at the same time, you understand, at least I think, I don't know, I really don't know what it's like for people half my age to watch movies, especially people who weren't alive in the time periods some of these movies are portraying. But for me, it felt like not only was it a great way to update A Christmas Carol, the idea of taking a high-power TV executive and how he sort of is so potentially influential in so many people's lives because programming, that's an interesting debate on programming, isn't it? How much what we watch and what we see on TV affects the way we think and behave. And in fact, I love, especially now, watching the sequence where his boss comes in and says, you know, cats are beginning to watch television and soon they might be a demographic we have to worry about, so I want to start dropping some animals in wherever we can. Like, isn't there a dormouse in A Christmas Carol, but shouldn't there be one? That was so outlandish for 1988 that it was clearly a joke. Yet today, with the way things are, I kind of feel like this might have actually even been a real conversation somewhere. You know, Netflix or Life of Pets, you know, think about it. Just think about it. It's funny. It's funny, and I think we need these types of conversations every once in a while. You know, it's good for you young folk to talk to your older uncles and grandfathers and parents even and just say, you know, tell me a little bit about what the world was like. You know, and you have to have that insight. You know, you have to be led around your life by spirits to realize where you got off track. And I think, you know, for anyone who's been listening to my other show, Feeling It, Healing It, A Diary of Recovery, it's an interesting time in my life. I almost feel like I'm ripe for something like this to happen. If only I were a high-powered executive or somebody who was rich enough to affect the world. So it's interesting because there's been plenty of memes these days that say, isn't it crazy how one of our holiday classics is the story about how really, really wealthy people basically have to be scared into being compassionate and giving and that they don't even care about Christmas in the way that they did as a child until ghosts literally threaten them and show them their future, in which it's really they just show them that, hey, you're gonna die, and when you die, if you were a dick in real life, people are gonna think you're an asshole and talk all kinds of shit about you after you're gone. I mean, it's amazing how much of this is all about ego. And if anything, think American Psycho. You know, the 80s was all commercialism, capitalism, corporate ego, cocaine-fueled mania. We don't see cocaine use in this movie, but you can assume that he probably being the youngest TV vice president in the history of television as far as the lore of this film is concerned, you know, he had to be doing some cocaine. He has a mirror in a drawer that he opens just to kind of check his face and make sure he kind of gives himself a little silent pep sneer before he berates and confronts the board of executives that he's in charge of that, you know, are presenting him all the promos for consideration. You know, we're talking about a guy who, when he finds out that his horrifying promo for A Christmas Carol was so intense that an old lady like keeled over and died from fear, he goes, "This is perfect. You can't buy this kind of publicity." He has the definition of cross written over his mini gym in his executive's office suite, and it says, "Cross, a thing they nail people to." You know, it's like, this is the kind of thing that I think now would be, you know, you'd be afraid that it got exposed on Twitter that you have that hanging in your office. Yet, it was something that's sort of bragged about very openly in the corporate world, at least as far as what we were shown on TV and in movies. And we get it. He's kind of like cold and callous, but then you go through his history and you see it's like, oh man, he had the love of his life. And it's funny because this is yet again on these nostalgia trips for Dave the Klone here. I often see myself as the kid looking at these characters thinking, is that what being a grown-up is going to be like? And I think sometimes if I could find that scientist out there who's inventing time travel or needs a guinea pig who might get stuck in a time period they can send them back to, I would definitely volunteer if they were shooting for the late 80s into the 90s, because that, I think, was the time I feel like the world at least made sense to me. And I mentally was prepared for being an adult in that world. The world we're in now, very challenging, and I feel like this is a phenomenon we're always going to feel like. We're always going to feel like the world that just passed by 10 years ago made so much more sense in retrospect, and I wish I could go do that again and having to deal with all the new challenges that are coming out our way. But and the holidays are often a time of reflection. So it's fun for me as far as having traditions go, to have movies like Scrooged, movies like Die Hard, movies like A Christmas Carol, to know that at this time of year, whether it's a more high versus low type of year, if it's a peak rather than a valley type of year, you're still going to have these moments to look forward to. And so Christmas Vacation was another one where it was sort of like once Thanksgiving passed by, it was time to start watching Christmas Vacation. I know growing up, my uncle and his family, it was sort of, that was what they would have on the day after Thanksgiving when they were setting up their Christmas tree. For me, it's really become Scrooged. Out of all of the movies that people start sharing memes about and sharing visuals from, especially a lot of the new Facebook groups I'm in, where we're seeing people just kind of randomly put up, hey, is it this movie versus this movie? Like, heart for this one and like for this one. When Scrooged comes up, no matter what it's against, I'm always like Scrooged. Okay, not only because of it's funny and the sort of nostalgia feeling about it, but like for Bill Murray, this was so epic. He improvs the entire speech at the end, and I realized at the time he actually was criticized because people felt like it was a little repetitive. He kind of maybe meandered a little and got lost. And every time I watch it, I do. Like, there is a part where he says, I want the miracle. The miracle can happen for you. It can happen every day. The miracle can happen for you. But you know what? It also kind of portrayed that level of elation when you were just shown the scene of your own death. And that if you can stop being such an uptight lunatic and start being just like the person you were in the first flashback when you met the love of your life and when you remembered what it was like to love Christmas, although maybe he never really did. He had, as in all Bill Murray movies, his brothers were in this one, and his brother playing his father in the flashback brings him home 5 pounds of veal. No kid understands the value of a gift like that, but at the same time, no kid can play with 5 pounds of veal unless maybe you're one of the kids on Bob's Burgers, which I've been reintroduced to by my niece and nephew very recently. So I think maybe there's a place in my mind that goes, if Louise Belcher got 5 pounds of veal, she would make a new Meat Man movie. Especially, too, this movie had some serious dark shit going on. In the 80s, I feel like it was a lot more understandable, or at least you were just less shocked, like when his dad, the first ghost, the Marley stand-in being the his former mentor in the world of TV executive production, shows up and like the mouse pushes the golf ball out of the back of his head, and then even when he holds him out the window and Frank is ripping pieces of the flesh, we have moments in this movie that verge into this sort of Night of the Living Dead territory. Definitely the whole thing where the sort of ghost of Christmas future at the end showing up as this semi-cyborg-ish Grim Reaper who has a TV screen for a face, but underneath his robes has these sort of troll-like demon children trapped inside his rib cage. And even there's like a shot where he's sitting in his office and he's drinking vodka, and it's after he's been going through multiple ordeals. I haven't even mentioned David Johansen yet as the Ghost of Christmas Past, driving a cab. Great. I love the visual of the meter being sort of like the indicator, sort of the flux capacitor of his time machine, showing us what year they're going to. And then I don't even know how do we address this sort of S&M style Carol Kane innuendo-laden violence of the fairy-esque Ghost of Christmas Present. And then for the Ghost of Christmas Future, before we even see it, this gigantic skeletal arm reaching out from the TVs behind him as he's sitting in his office by himself drinking vodka to try to like ground after this day of being shuttled about by spiritual entities. And it's like, you know, and it just happens, and then he before it grabs him, he's interrupted by Elliot coming back in. So Elliot's an executive he fires the day before Christmas, who we see throughout. You know, one of the things Richard Donner was great with in the 80s, and something that I think they did a better job with in films in the 80s, is having what they used to call runners, where you would have these sort of like B, C level characters and storylines that you would just come back and visit momentarily. It's almost like, ironically, the way that the Bill Murray Caddyshack character would sort of become these like sort of randomly come back. Oh, you know, Cinderella story. That whole sequence just comes out of nowhere and sort of almost doesn't necessarily feel like it connects to anything that came before it or after it. But it's just to show you that this guy is always there. You know, we keep seeing Bob Goldthwait, who probably I feel like should have gotten an award for this portrayal of Elliot Loudermilk getting fired the day before Christmas. We don't ever meet the rest of his family. We do meet Grace's family, so that's, I guess, maybe she's a little more Bob Cratchity than Elliot is, but Elliot's the one who gets brought back on at twice his salary and is given the sort of more executive level position at the end, replacing the Bob Cratchit being made partner thing. So it is kind of an interesting how they had to split it up into two characters in order to be able to do everything and have it feel like it would exist in this world of corporate America, corporatized entertainment America. Man, so much going on. I feel like I haven't even talked about any of the funny stuff. Getting hit in the face with the toaster. But just so cool to, especially if you watch Christmas Carol on the same day, to look at all the parallels. Like, he sees his brother and family. It's his brother who invites him to dinner instead of his nephew. And when he's going around with the Ghost of Christmas Present, he sees them playing instead of similes, which, God, you know, Victorian era games at parties. People, y'all are definitely out there. It almost reminds me of Amadeus with Tom Hulce, where they have this sort of game where if you lost, they had to, like, I don't know, expose their knees, which is like, that was like practically being at a strip show back in the times of Amadeus Mozart. But here they're playing Trivial Pursuit, you know, and it's sort of, but it's like, you know, it's still there, you know, especially even for a little kid. It was easy to see what this movie was, and just calling it Scrooged instead of Screwed, so cool. I mean, I don't know, everything about it just works. I'm just gushing at this point. It's almost 3 a.m. It's Christmas morning. I'm going to have to try to catch a nap before all the kids in the house wake up so that we could do presents. I'm visiting my sister in Virginia, and we're going to basically do this in 2 waves because my other sister and her kids are coming over. I even said we should watch this movie. You know, the kids are all Most of the boys are 9. My niece is 11, and there's a toddler who does, everything flies over his head because he's only like 2.5. So we could watch pretty much anything and it won't necessarily matter. But I think the boys are all around the same age that I was, just like with Die Hard. When I saw this for the first time, I think they'll be able to handle it. And I often wonder if they're watching movies in the ways that I did. This whole like looking at it going, is this what being a grown-up is going to be like? And as much as I never thought it while I was watching this as a kid, some of the work I did being in corporate video, seeing the scenes where you're seeing the crew in the control room and all the production stuff happening, I feel like there's a certain level of familiarity I have with what that kind of dynamic is like, and it's very interesting to especially see like the captain from Lethal Weapon be in there as one of the TDs, and the other Danny Glover, who was also in Gremlins 2, which is interesting because Gremlins 1 is very much a Christmas movie. Gremlins 2 is very much not a Christmas movie. But Gremlins, it has to get mentioned, and it's sort of in that 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon way connected because the other Danny Glover is in this as sort of an up-and-comer director from LA who's friends with the owner or the president of the network's son, and they go to lunch in the middle of the movie after he's been visited by his Marley stand-in, and he's expecting the first ghost to come calling at that point, and he thinks this guy Bryce is the ghost, and he's not. It really doesn't feel like Christmas until Bill Murray has run over and thrown ice all over a guy that he saw on fire and then tells them that he thinks he was Richard Pryor. And it's like stuff like that. Like, they don't even go to that length to explain that joke. You have to know that Richard Pryor caught on fire and during a filming of, I think it was a commercial. Oh no, that was Michael Jackson. But you have to know that Richard Pryor caught on fire, probably because it might have been drug related. I think it was drug related. You could Google it. This is the kind of stuff. This is exactly the kind of conversation that would be around a water cooler. Someone would say, yeah, didn't some shit like that happen to that guy? Why does that joke work? There's always that one person, right, who when you're talking about a movie like this goes, yeah, I've never understood that line. Why did he say Richard Pryor? And it's like, I had the parents that were like, my mom was like, oh yeah, Richard Pryor caught on fire. I don't think at the time she said it was because he was smoking crack and his face caught on fire, but he was smoking crack from what I remember. May he rest in peace, the late great Richard Pryor. Oh man, oh my God, we're at the part where the dancing girls, and it's funny too because they showed you too like the sex cells. Like we're changing Christmas Carol enough to have half naked dancing chicks as the sort of open to the film. Buddy Hackett playing the late great Buddy Hackett playing Ebenezer Scrooge in the show within the show here. Oh my God, that scene at the end when Bill Murray has to kiss that woman under mistletoe. Every time I watch this movie, I go, man, when was that? I have yet for that to happen. I've never been at a place where mistletoe was hanging. It was like, oh my God, someone's under that. I have to go sexually assault them. See, all right, that's one of the parts where maybe the modern world might be a little bit more on the correct interpretation of things. This whole idea of there being a Christmas tradition that, unsuspectingly someone could be standing under mistletoe, and if they are, hey, you're free range to kiss them. That kind of stuff being normalized back then, okay, yes, I think definitely eyebrow raising enough. Probably we should build in some consent rules around stuff like that, but not enough to say we should burn down the world because it ever happened. That's probably on the scale of human atrocity, kissing under the mistletoe as a Christmas tradition, probably like several levels below slavery, let's say. So things like that. The Karen Allen character in this, she's another person. There's so many people in this movie. Oh my God, Karen Allen. It's interesting. I feel like there was a certain level of as a kid understanding when we see the flashback of his relationship with her, sort of a more simple, living a little bit of a bohemian lifestyle, doing the Christmas gifts the night before they go visit family, and having that sort of sense, like when they first see each other now, and it's been, 7 years, 10 years, 14 years, whatever it's been since the last time they've seen each other. Clearly at the time when I saw this movie at 8, I had not had relationships like that, but watching it now, I'm like, oh man, I think in the expecting my life, as I became an adult, to be like the life I've seen in movies, I definitely am starting to think that I know which of my relationships was my sort of Karen Allen relationship. I don't know that I would think that she's the one per se, but I feel a certain some kind of way with this one. And I think that's part of the magic of watching these movies with a older, more experienced eyes than we had when we first saw them. It's sort of like your mind is constantly doing this Rolodex comparison to the times of the past and where you are now. And I think that's another thing about movies that makes them magical to us, and that's why some of us have movies that make us feel good, that when we watch them, no matter what's going on, we feel better. Oh my god, cell phone with the whole shoulder bag pack. That is definitely one of the things that's weird about seeing movies that take place in the 80s. Like, no one's got phones, and the only people who do are like crazy, wealthy, high-power executives, and even then it was like a phone that came with a whole sort of purse that you had to wear because the battery required to having a portable phone that you could call people from wherever was like psychotic. How things have changed, how far we've come, how awesome modern technology is. In any case, Scrooged all over the map. Definitely a Christmas holiday season staple. Oh my god, Socrates, the guy who played Socrates in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, is the waiter at the lunch with Danny Glover and Bill Murray. It's just, back then that guy was nothing. Not nothing, but like he wasn't somebody that I would recognize and say, oh my god, it's Socrates. But to see Socrates taking drink orders and making it seem like this very proper, I don't know, guys. It's late, it's Christmas. Merry Christmas out there to everybody, and happy holidays, and happy whatever days you're celebrating. Thank you for tuning in. Let me know what you think. Do you watch Scrooged and think we need to burn down the world, or is it a movie that has fond memories for you? Just like all the other episodes of this show, a very big part of why we do this podcast is for the nostalgia factor, and nostalgia is, a double-edged sword. It's got so many components that have emotional milestone connections for us, but sometimes can unlock sadnesses, and so it's kind of an interesting pool to swim in sometimes. But I'm glad we have these sort of bookmarks in history, in both the history of film and in our own personal histories, and it is quite a blast. I love these conversations. I wish I had people to have them with. And so here I am having them with you guys. And please feel free to join the conversation. Leave us some comments if anything strikes your fancy, or if anything has been provoked for you thought-wise. Otherwise, until the next time, until you do find yourself sipping some eggnog or drinking a damn fine cup of coffee and watching a holiday classic, I am Dave the Klone. This has been 15 minutes of movie memory madness. I think I've probably lived up to the title of the podcast more this episode than any of the previous ones, and I'll try to make it more of a habit of that going forward. But I'm sure there's stuff I didn't talk about, like the doctor from Total Recall appearing in the early days flashback for Bill Murray when he played a dog on a kids show on the network that he is now the vice president of. Stuff like that. Maybe that his mom is smoking a cigarette while she's pregnant with his little brother in the flashback when they go back to his house. Stuff like that. Shows you how far we've come as a society. But until then, anyway, I am now rambling. happy holidays out there. I think maybe before the month is over, we'll get one more. Oh, no, we won't. Next week we'll be in New Year's territory. So we'll be back to the non-holiday films at that point. So join us, won't you, around the water cooler. If you like what you're hearing, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. You know what to do. Smash the bell icon so that you're notified every time we drop some new content. And we'll be back next time and see you at the movies.
You've been listening to the Hollow9ine Network, bringing you the very best in fan-made media. That's the word hollow, the number 9, I-N-E. Find the Hollow9ine Network on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Snapchat. Rate and review us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever you find your podcasts. Email us at hollow9podcast@gmail.com. Leave us your feedback. Join in the conversation and be a part of the action. Join in the fun. Hollow9ine.